All right, so let's talk about inverse trig functions. Okay, so here I've graphed the function sine of theta. Remember, inverse functions, all we do is switch the x and the y values. So we switch the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. So say I ask you for the sine inverse of 1/2. So what I'm wanting to know is the sine of what angles will give you a value of 1/2. So we can look at the unit circle, and we see that if I did the sine of 30 degrees, I get 1/2. So sine inverse of 1/2 would be 30 degrees. Okay? But that's not the only answer. Also, this point, this one matches with this. So this point would be, you guys can't see that. Let me try again. So this point would be negative square root of 3 over 2, 1/2. But still, the sine of 150 degrees is 1/2. So sine inverse of 1/2 could also be 150 degrees. Okay. And of course, we can keep going around the unit circle as many times as we want. So to get back to this point, if I go 360 degrees on around, I would be at 390 degrees. So that would be another answer. And if I went all the way around the circle back to this point, that would be 360 plus 150. I can't do that in my head. 360 plus 150. 0, 1, 3, 4. That'd be 510 degrees. And so on. Right? You could keep going around the circle as many times as you want. Then you could also go backwards around the circle. So I could also go this way. That would be negative 330 degrees. Or I could go backwards to this point. That would be 180 plus there would be negative 210. So that would be another answer. Negative 210 degrees. Or inverse of 1/2. Negative 330 degrees, and so on, back that way forever. So you have an infinite number of answers to the sine inverse of 1/2. Just these 2 points. However I can get them going around and around the circle as many times as I want, or going backwards as many times as I want. All right, so let's look at these values on the graph of sine. So what I'm asking is what angle values can I plug in a sine that'll give me the 1/2. So sine inverse of 1/2, I'm trying to find this point, and of course this keeps on doing the same pattern forever, so there'll be more points out here, out there. So you can see that you get your 30 degrees, your 150 degrees, then the next one would be out here at 390, and then 510 and so on. And then back this way, you would get the point negative 210, negative 330, and so on. All right, so let's see if we can graph this inverse relation. So remember, an inverse function or an inverse relation, all I'm doing is switching this coordinate with this coordinate. So now, where my angles were on the horizontal axis, now my angles will be on the vertical axis. These points, and remember these points that go on this axis are actually the y values off the unit circle. But these points will now be on the horizontal axis. So the range of the sine function was from negative 1 to 1. So the domain of the inverse relation will be from negative 1 to 1. The domain of sine was all real numbers. So here the range of the inverse relation will be all real numbers. So let's see if we can plot this. So here we have the point 0, 0, so that will stay the same. Okay. I've got the point 90 degrees 1. So over here that point will be 1, 90 degrees. Here I have the point 0, 180. So over here I will have the point 180 0. Here I have the point 270 degrees, negative 1. So over here I'll have negative 1, 270 degrees. That'll be here. Here I have the point 360, 0. So over here it'll be 0, 360. So all I'm doing is switching the x and y coordinates. Over here I have the point negative 90, negative 1. So over here, I will have negative 1, negative 90, and then so on. My next point then would be negative 180, 0. That goes here. And then the same pattern will continue on like that. And if I graph it, it should look something like this. All right, so things to notice here. This was a function, but it was not one-to-one. So this passes the vertical line test, makes it a function, but it fails the horizontal line test, so it's not one-to-one. So remember what that means. If you have a function that fails the horizontal line test, its inverse is not going to be a function. Because if it fails the horizontal line test here, it will fail the vertical line test from here. And you can see that this massively fails the vertical line test. So this is not a function. So the inverse relation of sine is not a function. And of course you could see that already, because if we plugged in 1/2 in the sine inverse, we got an infinite number of answers out of it. So clearly it's not a function. All right, so this is not a function, fails the vertical line test, but we would really, really like for sine inverse of x to be a function. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cheat so that it is a function. We're just going to take this part right here. Okay, so this part of the function. Okay, and we're going to chop off all the rest of it. So let's see, I'll do this. All right, so we're going to get rid of all the rest of this. So now, what you've got here is just a function. You've got this little piece. Okay. But notice, now the domain is still from negative 1 to 1. So I'm able to plug in all of these values from negative 1 to 1. That's what I want. And my range is now going to be from negative 90 degrees to 90. So what we're going to do is we're going to restrict the domain of the sine function to be from negative 90 to 90. Okay, so we're just going to take this piece right here. That's going to be the domain of sine, which means that we only have this part of the sine function here. So we've restricted the domain of the sine function to be from negative 90 to 90, which means you only get this piece. Now this is a function, passes the vertical line test. It's also 1-to-1, passes the horizontal line test. So it's a 1-to-1 function, which means its inverse will also be a 1-to-1 function. So now we've got what we want. If we just use this part of the sine function, its inverse will also be a function, and we're good. All right, so now, since we've restricted the domain of sine to be between negative 90 and 90, then the only answer, there should only be one answer to this question now, and it would be the one that's between negative 90 and 90. So it would be this one, 30 degrees. So if you ask your calculator for the sine inverse of 1/2, it's going to tell you 30 degrees. Okay? If you put 1/2 into the function, it's going to tell you 30 degrees. That's the only one in here. It won't tell you this one or this one or this one or this one. You only get one answer now, 30 degrees. On the unit circle, Okay, we restricted sign to go from negative 90 to 90. So we're only talking about, here's negative 90, here's 90. So we're only using the right half of the circle for the sine function. Okay, so when I ask you for the sine inverse, the only answer, if you're talking about a function, is one in the right half of the circle. You don't have to look at the ones over here. So the sine inverse of 1/2, the only answer would be 30 degrees.